Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's NKBA KBIS business webinar, Mastering the New Kitchen and Bath Design Guidelines. As we continue our theme of K&B sales for May, I'd like to give a huge thank you to Hardware Resources for sponsoring this month's Design and Business webinar series. Please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Doug Walter, CMKBD, owner of Doug Walter Architects. Doug, please take it away.
Hello, I'm Doug Walter, an architect and CMKBD from Denver, Colorado. I've been an NKBA member since 2002, but only active in the chapter and nationally since 2017. I've spoken 7 times at KBIS, Voices of the Industry, and presented to over a dozen chapters through the chapter presentation program. I won National Design Awards at KBIS in 2022 and 2023, and got to judge this year's contest, which was quite an honor. I also co-authored the lighting badge, and more importantly, the kitchen and bath design guidelines, which is the topic of today's session. So let's get into it. All professions have standards, guidelines, regulations, and codes that govern them. These standards are changed and updated frequently. For instance, the International Residential Code that we all work under in the US is updated every 3 years. For us in the kitchen and bath industry, we're supposed to follow the latest kitchen and bath design guidelines published in late 2022. I was part of the task force charged with updating the 2017 guidelines, which started as early as late 2019. It took us 2.5 years to accomplish this. Today, I want to familiarize you with what's in them and spend a bit of time on the ones that changed the most and tell you why, so that you can feel more comfortable working with them in your designs, or not. But you should know that you shouldn't break the rules until you know what the rules are. So let's get started. This is the new kitchen and bath design guidelines. Hopefully you have a copy. If you don't, you need to get one for many, many reasons. And the basic overview or outline of the talk is kind of how we got here, the rewriting process itself, and the biggest part of this talk is highlights of key changes that affect you, and then there'll be a question and answer at the end. Historically, here's how we got here. Back in the 60s, there's something called the Small Homes Council, Building Research Council publication. They published kitchen planning standards, sort of a home economics sort of study. In 1975, NKBA joined up with the Small Homes Council to release a technical manual. In 1986, they launched a bathroom specialist training, and in 1992, they first published the 31 kitchen, 27 bathroom planning guidelines. One of the things we did in rewriting the guidelines is look at every section critically, and in the last iteration, there was a whole section that carried over, I think, from the 60s about measuring cabinet and counter space and cubic inches and all sorts of things. And it really made no sense to us. It's just, as kitchen designers, I think our charge is to get as much functional cabinetry and aesthetic cabinetry in a space as possible. The only place it really comes in handy to know what's small, medium, and large is when you're entering a contest. And usually they have simple square foot formulas, not cubic foot of cabinets. So in 2007, it was my favorite issue of the guidelines, this little green book here. It was pocket size. You could put it in your pocket and take it to a job site. I bought a half dozen of them and put them at the computers of all my drafters. In 2012, they updated it 5 years later. And then in 2016, 4 years later, the blue issue, which is the one, that I'm most familiar with before we got to the new one. And obviously, you've seen that these guidelines are growing. Guidelines don't get smaller. There aren't less. There are more as we discover new things and new ways of designing and demands from clients. So it all started with a phone call from Johanna Bars, a staff member in charge of publications at NKBA, asking me to be part of a committee that was going to rewrite these guidelines, and it was probably a 6-month project. So with that in mind, I signed on with 8 other people. And the first thing I did is kind of redlined or added red lines to what I'd already redlined in the old guidelines, the 2016 guidelines. lighting in particular was badly written. I put my thoughts down on paper about the kitchen guidelines and about the bathroom guidelines. As we went through this process, which, like I said, ran 2.5 years, there were weekly Zoom calls. There were subcommittees. Some of us passed sketches back and forth, and then chief architect was nice enough to collect them and redraw them in a identical format, which was very nice. So this was the committee led by a very capable Judith Neary and Corey Clausen. Chris is a talented designer out of California. Robin, of course, we all know was Educator of the Year at this year's KBIS. Adam Gibson is a very talented designer in Indianapolis. Paula Kennedy, very well known to most people in NKBA for the courses she teaches. She's out of Seattle. And Gita, I apologize, I still can't pronounce her last name, is one of the two Canadians on the committee. I think she's from Toronto. I was very excited that Mary Jo Peterson made this kind of the last thing she did for NKBA. She was a very, very influential kitchen designer and educator and writer. She had monthly columns in some of the magazines. The publications that we looked at kind of were all across the board. These were not codes. These in particular were books that we refer to when we're designing, whether it's universal design or interiors in general, the NCIDQ reference manual. But codes are terribly, terribly important. The IRC is the main one here, the National Building Code of Canada. ANSI A117 is the very influential publication dealing with ADA requirements. There's a 2025 issue that's in process right now. I know someone on that committee. ASHRAE, Illuminating Engineering Society, and just recently Canada updated their accessibility for homes publication. So we're kind of taking a look at that and comparing it to our guidelines to make sure that we've covered everything there. The important thing to know is that following the guidelines is terrific. It's important for many reasons, but it's equally or more important that you follow the codes because they control with your local building department, the authority having jurisdiction. So let's get into the meat of the program, which is really the key changes and how they affect you. First of all, there are 8 planning categories, starting with egress and passageways, then kitchen, and then bath planning, interior environment, new section on outdoor kitchen and outdoor baths, a support space section, and then the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and safety section. There are some new terms in there, or perhaps new to you: activity center, personal space, work zone. There's areas for tasks, and then tasks are the specific things that people are doing in certain areas, at stove or the sink or what have you. There's an appendix. It's part of the reason this book is over 280 pages, is we wanted to have the information at your fingertips so you don't have to go to your bookshelf to find information. So basic ergonomic information and things like bath linens and garments, because there's a closet section, which is brand new. So the 24 topics in total covered. The ones highlighted here in turquoise are all new in this edition. And then of course, some of the language has changed to be a little more politically correct. Master bedroom and bathroom are, of course, now principal bedrooms and bathrooms, a more gender neutral language. Grab bars have given way to assist bars because they sound less institutional to the clients. And most clients are scared when you mention grab bars, and all they can think of is nursing home or something like that. But today's grab bars are a far cry from what used to be available even 5 or 10 years ago. And instead of using the term handicap, we like to use varied physical ability, because we all have degrees of ability. And what we had when we were 20 is very different than what we have at 40 or 60. So we just recognize that people are on a continuum. And this was a very exciting thing to me, is I think in previous guidelines, when we're thinking of accessibility, all we're thinking about is people in wheelchairs. But there's a whole spectrum of ability, from someone who's perfectly mobile and ambulatory and can stand and function and bend and kneel and that sort of thing, to someone who needs a little bit of assistance, to someone who's seated in a wheelchair. And then those disabilities, if we want to call them that, or those varied abilities, can either be short-term, as if you're recovering from a joint replacement, say, or long-term, as a chronic condition or a deteriorating condition. One of the things that we don't directly address is other abilities, neurocognitive issues, neuromuscular, things like that. But they are kind of, we thought of them in different aspects, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So here are some of the basic measurements that we have to kind of keep in mind. How wide a walker is, for instance, or the fact that someone on crutches needs about 6 inches more than someone in a walker. And then the powered scooters and chairs that people have kind of changed the thinking about dimensions in aisleways and passageways for good reason. So the basic measurements to keep in mind for clear floor space is 30 by 48 for someone standing and 32 by 52 for someone in a chair. You apply these dimensions to your areas of your kitchen and bathroom to make sure that you have enough room. The illustrations are new and consistent all the way through. They were somewhat disjointed in some of the previous issues, but they're all basically by the same author. The turning radius 60 to 67 is important. 60 is for a retrofit, and 67 is for new construction by code. And as I'll talk about later, these turning radiuses are insufficient for someone who's in a power chair or certainly a scooter. So let's compare some of the requirements for different aspects of our kitchen and bath designs in the 2007, the 2016, and the 2022 guidelines. So landing areas got a subtle change. You can see that it was pretty consistent for the landing area on either side of a sink. At a range, the 12 inches on one side is now 18 on one side instead of 15. Not a huge deal, just a subtle change. Eating counter depths, on the other hand, got a dramatic shift. It used to be 12, 15, and 18. Now it's 15, 18, and 21. So here you can see the 42-inch counter used to be 12, now it's 15, and so on. And this is to give the user more knee space and have them stop kicking the back of the cabinets or the wall that's supporting the countertop. But what this brought up is the need for reinforcement for deep overhangs like the 18 or 21. We recommend you consult with your fabricator to make sure that they can self-support. If there's any doubt, I would be putting some flat steel supports under the countertop to support them. Now this is a big one, perhaps the biggest, I think, of the whole guidelines. Minimum aisle width now is 48 inches, 48 to 52. In the last guidelines, it was 42, but if you had an intersecting aisle like the top illustration, one of them had to be 48, the other could be 42. In truth, this is the one section I wish I could go back and rediscuss, because I think 48 is pretty hard to achieve, and especially in smaller kitchens. I got to judge the National Design Awards this year, the kitchen category, and I found, and I kind of wish that they hadn't made this year's contest based on the new guidelines, because you know how it sometimes takes a couple of years to get a project photographed, furnished, and photographed. So I think a lot of the stuff that was being submitted was pre-2022 guidelines. Anyway, I was pretty lenient on my judging of that aspect. I was looking for 48 if I could get it on the primary aisleway where the cooktop and the sink were, but for a side access, I was certainly okay with 42 or even 36, but that's up to the individual judge. So if at all possible, try to do 48 for your main aisleway. If you have a U-shaped kitchen, a dead-end kitchen, wraparound, it has to be at least 60 for wheelchair turning radius. Now, and that 60 is measured from countertop to countertop, not from cabinet to cabinet. If you do a cabinet to cabinet of 60 inches and it's an ADA project in a multifamily, they'll reject you because the countertop intrudes. Cabinet reach is something different from obviously someone standing to someone sitting in a chair. Sitting in a chair, the top of reach is 44 inches. The work triangle changed to the extent that it's still a 26-foot total for the 3 legs of the triangle, but in the old guidelines, you could only overlap the corner of an island 1 foot. Now you can overlap it 2 feet. And then we talk about multiple work triangles in some of these large kitchens that people are getting to do. This was another big one. First of all, let's look at the illustration on the left. The microwave is kind of at or a coffee machine, whatever that is a decent height for someone in a wheelchair. Where we get into trouble is if you're trying to do an over-the-range microwave, it is above the comfortable reach level of someone in a wheelchair. That's where the under cabinet microwave drawers are terrific. But the big change is in the vent requirements. It used to be your vent could be the same size as your cooktop. Came up with a recommendation to widen it by 6 inches. So a 30-inch cooktop would require a 36-inch hood. For 2 reasons for that. One is the more area of vent you have, the more capture you have, because the grease and everything coming off that cooktop is not coming up directly vertical. It's kind of spreading out as it goes. And the other reason is to protect the upper cabinets. I have seen kitchens with gas cooktops where the edges of those lower cabinets or upper cabinets are actually charred from flame. So going back to this is one we just finished, and the clients didn't want to do a wider one. They wanted the cabinet space every inch they could get. And since they were doing an induction top rather than gas, which they used to have, they felt quite comfortable with the 30-inch hood over the 30-inch range. So here's one done correctly according to new guidelines where it's 6 inches wider. It also looks better. It gives a little more presence to the cooking area, which is the primary space in a kitchen. And don't do it like this. This followed no guidelines, but it was the only place you could find to fasten a hood. The important thing with ventilation equipment is to follow manufacturer's specifications. Most codes and code officials will defer to what the hood manufacturer says. This is obviously an over-the-range microwave vent combination. They are very prominent, especially in lower-end kitchens. But it's not just a problem for someone in a wheelchair, because in this case it's about 52 inches to the bottom of that microwave, which is well above comfortable reach of someone in a wheelchair, and they're reaching across basically open burners to get to it. But even for standing ambulatory people, it's dangerous because it's a very high level, and you're taking hot things out of there, and so it's a little bit tenuous to especially for people who are somewhat challenged physically, to comfortably take things out of that are super hot and put them down in the landing area. The ventilation requirements are important. If you're over 600 CFM, you're definitely going to need outside combustion air. With fewer and fewer clients demanding gas, it's become less of an issue. I just recently put in a 30-inch gas range next to I think it was a 15-inch 2-burner induction hob for a client who wanted both, and we put a 48-inch downdraft behind both appliances. Then, of course, there's the new types of hoods, the ones that are up at the ceiling. Again, those are probably pretty high capacity to do the job. Let's talk about bathrooms a little bit. This was a new requirement of minimum clear floor area for a tub with a non-slip flat bottom. Shubs is what Judith Neary calls them, combination of a shower and a tub. The guidelines are asking for a 8-inch offset from the wall for ease of cleaning as well as maintaining some of the plumbing. But it's interesting, in this illustration here, they show the faucet behind the tub, which is a very common place to put them. But they're then in another section, they say, don't put them back there. So you see in this previous one, the bottom illustration, they actually put it off to the side, a little bit easier to reach. And don't do it like this. Doorways had a subtle but important change. On the pool side of a door for someone in a wheelchair, it used to be 18 inches. We're asking for 24 inches, and that's due to the kind of the size of some of these power chairs that people are using. This was a pro bono job I did for this client, Tom, who was a quadriplegic after a electric scooter accident, and I had asked him to pose for me in the bathroom using the door. And then he's a what they call a functional quadriplegic, in that he can move his feet and hands somewhat. And I'd asked him to reach out and open the door, and this was the first time he'd actually done that, realized he could do it. So he was quite happy to be doing that. But you can see we have a pretty ample space on that side of the opening side of the door. So in terms of power chairs, they have small ones like the one on the upper left that are pretty compact and maneuverable. But the ones like you see down here on the lower right, much larger and have almost a 10-foot turning radius. So that's your 5-foot turning radius is not going to work. It's going to be a series of K turns. I've got another quadriplegic client who's got a ventilator hooked to the back of his, which adds another 2 feet on his chair. And then wet rooms are becoming more popular. And in general, we suggest to make them as large as possible. Better to be a foot too wide than a foot too small, especially if you're anticipating a disabled client, because often the caregiver has to share the space with the person in the shower chair. There's a section on urinals for the first time, and you'll notice in this top illustration, there are a couple vertical grab bars that are intended for someone who is ambulatory but has a little bit of trouble standing up and steadying himself. Also, you'll notice the offset for the toilet used to be 15, now it's 18, which means toilet compartments can be 36 inches now instead of 30. So that's a change. There's the 18-inch offset again. So the toilet compartment has grown, and they're suggesting outswing doors. You could probably get away with an in-swing door if the person is ambulatory, but knowing that if something ever happened to them, we could always change the swing of the door to make it outswing. And then assist bars. We spend a lot of time on assist bars and where they should be placed and what kind. Top illustration here has a illustration pretty much right out of ANSI A117, which I personally don't like, and there's a lower horizontal bar for someone using the tub, and a higher bar, maybe 4 or 5 inches above that, for someone standing in the shower, which I think is very redundant and also very institutional. I'd rather see someone use a single L-shaped bar with a vertical component that someone in the shower could use, and a horizontal one down low enough for someone in the bathtub to use. We also introduced some suggestions on how to do a angled bar, because those are very popular as well. But I would caution you, if you do specify an angled grab bar, to do it with a peened machine finish that gives a little more grip, because you might be trying to grab that with a soapy hand or something, and you need some non-slip. Knurling is the other process, peening or knurling. Also, some of the vinyl grab bars have a more of a non-slip textured finish. This bathroom on the left has knurled finishes on the vertical one that helps getting in and out of the shower. And then, of course, the horizontal bar is also knurled. Can't see in this picture, the shower head is on a slide bar, and that's also rated as a grab bar, as well as the towel bar outside of the shower is a grab bar anchored into the studs. And we'd strongly recommend that if you're opening up the bathroom on a remodel, opening it up to the studs, to put in solid blocking so you can get good support for your grab bars. If it's a retrofit, you can use these glorified toggle bolts that are rated for 250 or 300 pounds, but ideally you would do blocking for them. Now, lighting. This is one of my pet subjects. Finally, we actually have a metric for how much lighting and what quality lighting you should supply. And the metric is 50 foot candles, which is not a ton, but it's good enough for most people to see. The Illuminating Engineering Society says for someone 65 and older, you should be supplying 100-foot candles, twice that. And so in my own practice, I try to supply at least 100, and sometimes more for senior clients. The guidelines also suggest providing a 90 CRI rating minimum for all your lighting. Fortunately, that's becoming more available and affordable. For years, a lot of it was hovering around 80, 85. 90 and 95 make all the difference in terms of color rendering and fidelity. The color temperature is something that's up to you and your client especially. You want to make sure your client buys into whatever color you're speccing. 2700, of course, being a very warm yellow incandescent glow. I've got an older client that preferred that, so we did all her lights at 2700 Kelvin. Most of my clients like the 3000 Kelvin. Occasionally, I find someone who really wants a blue-white color, 3500. But you should show them the options before you go speccing the fixtures. Fortunately, as lights are getting more sophisticated, there are more and more lights available with a variable color temperature that you can set either by a dimmer or app on your phone or a lighting control system. So in the 2007 and 2016 guidelines, basically all it said is every work surface should be well illuminated by appropriate task lighting, whatever that means. Then in the illustration, you saw some under cabinet lights, which I suspect they were thinking were the task lights. The down lights are just floating out in the middle of the room, and it's been shown conclusively that lights anywhere other than over the countertops are basically not doing much for you. And then the older illustration had a light properly placed over the sink. You want to put those inboard a little bit, kind of over the middle or back of the sink, because people are leaning over the sinks. But 2016 issue had no light over the sink at all. I would say this is the hardest lesson for people to absorb, since they've been doing lighting wrong for so long. In both the national contest and in the Ottawa, Canada Design Awards I just judged a couple weeks ago, most people were just floating the lights out in the aisleways. It's easier that way. You don't have to obsess about lining them up with cabinets to make them look good. You just put them out in the middle of the space and call it good. My colleague David Warfel, a very talented lighting designer, his website is lightcanhelpyou.com. I'd highly recommend it. Says all lights in the aisles do are light the dogs and the dust bunnies. And that's true, because if you stand at the countertop, you're basically working in your own shadow. And notice on the right, he's got those disc lights. I'm sure you've seen them. Your electricians are probably pushing the heck out of them because they're cheap and easy to install, but they do almost nothing. I've tested them with clients to compare to regular downlights, and the best I can get down on the countertop from a disc light directly over the countertop is 10-foot candles, which is 40-foot candles shy of where it should be. So this is the current lighting illustration that shows lighting at the edge of the countertops, lights at the center of the sink, and then anywhere you have a tall appliance like a refrigerator or a pantry or something like that, you pull the lights out about 6 inches. Under cabinet lights are terribly important because we're really recommending layers of lighting. You know, a decorative overhead light or lights, as you see indicated on the island, there are 3 decorative pendants. But notice in between the 2 pendants, we have 2 downlights, because often those pendants are very attractive and decorative, but sometimes the lighting is just insufficient to put the 50-foot candles down on the countertop. This way we can ensure that the countertop is going to be well lit no matter what level the pendants are at. The under cabinet lighting is important. Over cabinet lighting we're using more and more, and a lot of people are doing toe kick lighting, which my personal opinion is it's, again, good for dust bunnies, but it doesn't do too much for you. So the key lesson here in the lighting section is the right light, which means the right type of light. None of these disc lights, but true down lights, and hopefully with a pretty narrow beam spread, like a narrow flood. And then mixed with attractive decorative lighting. Lighting on the right, or for that kitchen, that vaulted ceiling kitchen, is a suspended track, because light degrades in intensity dramatically the further it is from the source. So if I was trying to light from that 13-foot high ceiling, it wouldn't be anywhere near 100-foot candles by the time it got to the countertop. This way, with a suspended track at 9 feet, I can ensure that there's going to be plenty of light where it's needed, and we have the adjustability that's inherent in track lighting. Track lighting has gotten so much better than it used to be. It's so much smaller. Also notice in both of these kitchens, we took full advantage of both windows and skylights. Skylights are a terrific way to get daylight into a kitchen. A skylight will put about 3 times as much light into a space as a window will. And this is one of my pet peeves, chandeliers over tubs. We see it all the time. The magazine ads have it. You see projects all the time that have chandeliers over tubs, but these have been illegal, I think, both past issues of the guidelines as well as the code. You can't have a suspended surface type fixture within 8 feet of the water line of a tub, not from the floor, but from the water line. And obviously, this one on the right is way less than that because the door is 6'8". So you see this violated all the time. Maybe not this bad, but you see it violated. There's a new section on outdoor kitchens because they're becoming more and more popular. The big question with outdoor kitchens is when you have something where the barbecue is up against a wall, kind of inside on the outdoor space like this, you really need to provide adequate ventilation over it. On an open covered patio, you can get by without a vent, but it's, if in doubt, add a vent. For some reason, we came up with outdoor kitchens in urban, suburban, rural areas, or in this case, prehistoric areas. Here is a nice outdoor kitchen that Elizabeth Marcacci did. She's out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where her cooking appliances are on the very outside of the space. This is a very nice one that Adam Gibson did. Again, the cooking thing is against a wall with a very nice size hood over top of it. And then this is one I got to do with Gina DeMore Bowerly. Again, the cooking area is on the very outside edge of this large covered entertaining space. There's a section on outdoor bathrooms, and I don't know about you, but in Colorado, there's not a whole bunch of demand for an outdoor bath. We could probably only use it 5 months a year. But if you have to do one, this is the place to go to get some advice on it. The freeze thaw being the number one concern is how to keep the plumbing from freezing. This photo in here just amuses me. It looks like a TV ad for something that couples might use. And then miscellaneous topics on the in the thing. There are sections that deal with wellness because that's an increasing concern of all of us. Water conservation, water quality, air quality, sustainability issues. Some of these questions in italics were questions that came up soon after we published. We had several webinars to try to answer questions. And one of them was, how do you handle it when clients insisting on changing a design aspect against the guidelines or for their own preference, and how to discuss them? I would say the basis for your discussion ought to be health, safety, and welfare, because we are providing professional services ostensibly are not only making their life easier, but safer and better. As a matter of fact, any professional licensing, like architects' licenses, are based on us protecting health, safety, and welfare. That's the whole sole basis for licensing. So in the case of the hood, you might talk about how much better it would exhaust bad odors or combustion byproducts with a 6-inch larger hood. You want to try to follow the guidelines. One of the reasons to pay attention to guidelines is if you have any hope of winning NKBA contest, either your local design contest or the national contest, the judges are charged with following the guidelines. So they will have a checklist of things like aisle clearances and work triangles and lighting and things like that you need to follow. And if you don't, or if the client insists, like my client did, that they only wanted the hood to 30 inches, you need to be upfront about it and say, yes, we know that this doesn't follow the guidelines, but the client requested it, and given that it was an induction hood or whatever. And hopefully the judge will give you somewhat of a pass. I was very gentle on marking down people on guidelines this year because, like I said, I think it was about a year premature to hold them to the 22 guidelines. We all work under standards of conduct and professional code of ethics that you see once a year when you get your new certificate. There were questions about accessibility, people not knowing how to design for accessibility if you've never done it. So all the guidelines have factored in accessibility. There are some great accessibility books in the appendix. There are courses that you can take. NAHB sponsors a program called CAPS. It's an excellent program. It's a a 2 or 3 day course, depending on what kind of prerequisites you have. CLIP is another program, several day program that deals with accessibility. Those are very good learning experiences, and some of them you actually get in a wheelchair and try to maneuver. It's very interesting the first time you do it and try to go to the bathroom, again, using crutches. NKBA has webinars on the topic. And then where I learned to be sensitized to this was with my grandmother, who lived with lived with my mother until she was, I think, 102 when she went into a nursing home. But prior to then, she had lived at home with mother, and then actually until she was about 95, she had a bedroom upstairs that she somehow managed. And then we fixed up the family room for her. And just putting a handicap symbol on something does not make it handicapped accessible. Here's a comparison of some of the mobility aids that people in a wheelchair might use. Manual wheelchair has up to a 70-inch turning radius. The small power chairs have an 82-inch radius, and a scooter, which is maybe more used outside, has over a 10-foot turning radius. So that's why the 60-inch is a bare minimum for a turning radius for handicapped. Another question came up on how to ensure that appliance doors don't open into another, and that's simply by sketching them in on your plan. And here you see a conflict with the oven and the dishwasher, but since the oven and dishwasher are typically used at 2 different times, it's not a huge conflict. And then people want to know, what changed. Basically, everything's been updated. A lot of the content stayed the same and will be familiar, but others are new sections or dramatically updated sections like we just talked about. And in terms of if you're taking the CKBD test or CMKBD, you definitely need to know the guidelines backwards and forwards because a lot of the content is very based on them. So I'd highly recommend you get familiar with your guidelines. I usually mark my books with little tabs to help me get to sections quicker because I can't remember all of them in my head. And then again, what happens if you can't follow all the guidelines? There wasn't one of us on the committee that put these together that hadn't violated some of the old guidelines. It happens. You have a kitchen that doesn't allow you to do 48-inch or even a 42-inch aisleway or something. You just do the best you can with the space, but again, keep safety top of mind in that. Another question was, what about a first-time kitchen and bath designer? How do I get up to speed? And our recommendations would be, number one, get very active in your local chapter. That's where you're going to learn the most. They have programs almost every month. Find a mentor or mentors in your chapter who can help guide you. Most people are very receptive to helping younger designers. And then finally, don't forget to go to KBIS because it's really it's a smorgasbord of learning opportunities. Really a wonderful experience. So that's my overview of the key portions of the new guidelines. I hope you got something out of this that you can use. The guidelines are our essential resource when it comes to designing kitchens and baths for our clients. There are many other resources you want to access, and there's a wonderful 2-page bibliography in the back for your use. Codes are being the number one outside resource that may affect you. The guidelines reference current codes at the time, but as I mentioned, codes update every 3 years. Will the guidelines change again? Without a doubt, yes. There is already a small task force being assembled to review the 2022 guidelines and see if there are any changes or updates necessary. These will probably be distributed in form of an addenda to all purchasers of the guidelines at nominal cost, I hope. Perhaps you have strong feelings about the guidelines. If so, NKBA would love to hear from you. Feel free to contact them directly or email your suggestions to me, and I'll make sure they get in front of the right people. I enjoyed sharing my observations and tips on using the guidelines. In the limited time left, I'll try to answer your questions. And if we run out of time, or if you think of a question later, please feel free to email me and I'll answer each and every question. My email is on the bottom of the slide here. dougwalterarchitects@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. I appreciate the wonderful presentation. Thank you for going through all of that information for us. We have a ton of questions. I know we won't be able to get everything answered today. If we don't get to your questions, like Doug said, we will be sure to send via email and get those answers for you. With that said, Doug, let's dive right in.
Okay.
Our first question, you touched on this a little bit, the over-the-range microwaves. We had several questions about this. Mostly, are we seeing any movement toward 36-inch wide over-the-range microwave hoods to accommodate the new guidelines?
Not yet, but I really hope some manufacturers will start to do that. It's a great market opportunity. The over-range microwave is actually like one of their best-selling appliances of all the appliances in the kitchen. I don't particularly like them. Several other people in the committee were also very anti over-the-range microwave, but they made it through. So the answer is no, they're not available now, but I hope they're available in the future.
Perfect. Our next question is there an updated version for the K&B Guideline Handbook? I currently have the 4th edition. Is there a 5th edition available?
No, the 4th edition is the most current edition. But like I said, there is a task force that's active now, and we're going to have some corrections and addendas that we'll put out in some format. I think somebody from NKBA had mentioned there'd be a new edition. We're not going to reissue this book. We're just going to have a supplement to it that'll be the most current information.
Perfect. Our next question is touching on countertops and depth. If the countertop is now 21-inch depth, the fridge will come out of the counter, or should this part be a 24-inch depth?
Well, I think certainly the refrigerator section should be 24. I'm not sure where that question came from, because I don't think we're recommending 21-inch deep countertops in a kitchen. In a bathroom, that's the standard. As a matter of fact, if you can do deeper than 24, that's even better. I just finished a kitchen where we did 30-inch deep counters on two walls of the kitchen. That made for some very, very nice workspace, and all the appliances can be pushed to the back and things like that, all the countertop appliances. And the deeper the counter, you have to adjust your upper cabinets so they're not out of reach, of course, but you have more ability to disguise the refrigerator and build it in.
Perfect. Touching on that still, another question says, does the combined landing area apply to every fixture or equipment, or just the 3 major centers? For
Really,
example,
yeah.
someone said, for example, do we need 36 inches between a refrigerator and a sink?
Yes, you do, ideally, if you can get it. Yeah, it's a safety thing. I mean, you want to be able to, you're carrying something heavy, and it might be hot. You want a place to set it right next to it. So, yeah, the 36 is a fairly hard and fast rule.
Someone asked, can you clarify the recommended foot candle for 65 and older? I
Certainly.
believe it's 100. Some people said that it might be less.
No, it's 100. And that's recommendation from the Illuminating Engineering Society, which NKBA adopted. But it's not in the guidelines book. They kept 50 because that's a more achievable metric. But I found in my personal practice that my senior clients are much happier with 100 or above. Some of them I've been doing 125. And it really helps with their visual perception. If you can increase the light level without increasing glare for people with low vision, their visual acuity gets much, much better. So 100 is kind of my go-to standard for all kitchens, because we don't know when we're designing a kitchen if the client's parents are coming to help or the grandparents coming to help. We don't know the age of the user, of all users. So you design for a worst case scenario.
Perfect. Our next question is kind of going based off of lighting. We have a few questions about recessed lighting. The first is, can you explain the new lighting layout plan and why there weren't two recessed lights over the counter?
I saw that question when it came up as I was going through this, and I think the two cans at that lower right-hand counter were a mistake. I think in the original illustration, those were tall cabinets. That's why they're out from the what looks like a countertop. So you'll probably see that show up in the addenda. I really appreciate that feedback. And what was the first part of that question?
Um, they just asked why there were two recessed
Yes,
lightings.
yes. Yeah, those were misplaced according to that illustration.
Okay,
You're absolutely
perfect. No,
correct.
thank you for that clarification and
Sure,
catching that to that
sure.
attendee. Someone asked, what is the dimension recommended for a recessed can away from a wall cabinet?
Oh, yeah, that's easy. I would say 6 inch. Most wall cabinets are 12 to 13 inches deep, so 6 inches out would be 18 from the wall. And I would go no more than 25 from the wall for the center of the can, because you really do want to be in front of the cook and shining down on the countertop. The the lighting kitchen and bath lighting book, which was published in 2015 uh, uh, by Tammy McKay and Dan Blitzer, says in several places the light needs to be over the work surface, but then the recommendation was kind of torpedoed by the fact they had illustrations showing the cans anywhere but over the work surface. So 18 to 24 from the wall is a go-to. My personal favorite is 23.
Perfect, thank you. Sticking with recessed lighting, someone asked, in a small bathroom, 5 by 10, what is the recommended plan for recessed lighting? Um, should we add another recessed light near and or over the toilet?
Well, this is somewhat user preference. I often do a light at the toilet because people spend so much time on their iPhones or reading at a toilet. Certainly, you want a can or two in the shower. Uh, I think in the guidelines we showed an optional can over a sink, over a lav, but you don't have to. You can get by with just fixtures on either side or on top of the mirror. It's just another layer of lighting that you could add if you wanted a nicer, better lit bathroom to do a recessed can and put it directly over the center of the sink.
Perfect. Our next question is, are there any guidelines discussing a catering or secondary prep kitchen versus the main kitchen? Are there any differences? Something that they can maybe add or subtract from those secondary prep spaces?
That's a very good question. And no, there's nothing in the guidelines about secondary kitchens, and it's a trend that I've really seen um, uh, big time and judging national, a number of really nice scullery kitchens behind the main kitchen. Um, it's a great way to, like if you have a family that does a lot of entertaining and has a big family, sometimes 2 ovens are not enough. So uh, I've done pantries where we've included an oven and a sink for additional prep space. Um, but I think that's a very good suggestion. I'm going to bring it up to the committee to see if we want to add a section.
Amazing. Someone asked, are there any requirements or guidelines for flooring?
The only guidelines for flooring really talk about the difference in elevation going from room to room. That can't be any more than half an inch, and it ideally should be a beveled transition. So it's keeping keeping wheelchair access in mind and accessibility, and eliminating trip hazards. That's the main thing.
Perfect. Kind of touching on floor lighting, lower level lighting. Someone asked, in the kitchen, is it not redundant to have under cabinet linear lights as well as recessed lights in the ceiling?
Oh, that's a very good question. No, it's not redundant because the downlights will do a great job of illuminating the front part of the counter where you're working, but they don't do a very good job getting under the upper cabinets and lighting the back part. of the counter. That's where the under cabinets shine. So you really want to blend both the under cabinet lighting and the overhead lighting. I've done tests with different brands of under cabinet lighting, um, and it's pretty much impossible from the ones I've tested to get 100-foot candles just from the under cabinet light out on the edge of the countertop. You'll get it directly under the fixture, but even a foot away, the light degrades so fast that you might get 40-foot candles out there. So you need both. You need overhead lighting, you need under cabinet lighting. And of course, under cabinet lighting is a wonderful indirect light source, and a lot of people use that a lot at night. Um, it is sort of a night light, and it's just a very pleasant way to navigate around the kitchen if you're not doing critical tasks.
That's perfect. Thank you for that insight. Lisa asked, are your kitchen guidelines for all kitchens, not just accessible clearances? I'm referring to aisle widths.
And repeat the question. I'm having trouble understanding that.
Referring to the widths of aisles, she
Yes,
said, are your kitchen guidelines for all kitchens and not just accessible clearances?
they're for all kitchens, because going back to one of those first slides about the 5 different levels of ambulatory to wheelchair, we don't know what clients are going to be using it. And someone may be perfectly ambulatory today, but twist their ankle tomorrow, and suddenly they're on crutches or God forbid, in a wheelchair. I had a client a couple of years ago who was a triathlete, he's invincible, and I couldn't talk him into grab bars for the life of me. But he's at higher risk than most of us for injuries. But we certainly have the blocking behind the walls there. So if we get that call saying, I need grab bars, we can go grab some and go over there and install them. We did, however, put an assist bar in the guest bathroom on the first floor because he asked his parents, would you like an assist bar? And they said, oh, yes. So they were well aware of how useful they are. And the time, and let me kind of stress that a little bit. The time to install grab bars is before you need them, because it may keep you from having that accident, that slip and fall. And bathrooms are the #1 location for falls in the home, and they're incredibly hazardous. So, uh, excuse me, I would hope that we're all specifying on our drawings in shower and bathroom stalls, and even around toilets, um, blocking for the grab bars to be installed later. I even do blocking for towel bars, and I specify all my towel bars as assist bars, because when someone's falling, they're going to grab the nearest thing they can, and it's often the towel bar, which is going to rip right out of their drywall. I know there are some glorified toggles that people are using, um, that claim to be sufficient, but I don't trust them as much as I trust some 2x6s. And on every job site, there's going to be a ton of leftover 2x6s floating around you can use for blocking. Put them in, take pictures of them that you can give to the client so they know where they are down the road when they need them. But I would push very hard to install at least some minimal assist bars, a vertical one to help getting in and out, and a horizontal one, at least on the back wall of a shower or a tub. I've pretty much install them or draw them in on all projects, and it's up to the client to say, I don't think I want one. But like I think, as I said earlier, the aesthetics of grab bars have improved dramatically. You can get them in any finish, oil rub bronze, black, polished nickel, gold. And some of them are very pleasantly smaller, like 1.25 inches instead of 1.5 inches, and they've got some nice escutcheons, so they're very attractive. They're not the institutional ones. And then if you're doing contemporary, there's a nice vinyl coated line or two that you can use. It comes in different colors, and especially for senior low vision clients, you want you definitely want high contrast So in a white shower, you wouldn't do a white grab bar. You would do a red grab bar, a yellow grab bar. I'm looking at a chat that Claudia Hafsher just said. She said we're all just temporarily abled, and that is so true. We're ambulatory and healthy until we're not, and you don't know what may get you. I've had 2 joints replaced, and was certainly glad that I had thought to install assist bars earlier.
I appreciate you touching on that. We did have a few people wondering how can they, please the client, but also maintain guidelines and when to push and how to push. So I feel like Claudia said, we're all just temporarily abled, and being able to provide at least some assistance and help them plan for the future is amazing. We're coming up at time, so I do just want to end with one last question. If we didn't get to your question today, we will make sure Doug receives all of them and replies to all of you. And this webinar will be available on demand at nkba.org. You'll all be sent the link after this broadcast later today. Our last question is bathtub seating always recommended? It's shown in a few figures, but not mentioned in text. What does seating look like for a freestanding tub?
I'm a little bit unfamiliar with that. I didn't realize we were recommending bathtub seating. We certainly have seating options in showers. If it's a freestanding tub, your seating would be a removable tub chair. They make these aluminum and plastic seats, and if it's a low tub, you can do what's called a transfer seat, where you can slide onto the seat outside the tub and then slide over and be in the tub. If someone really has some mobility issues, highly recommend the walk-in tubs with a door on them. I just did one for a client. Actually, it was the second one I've ever done. I wish they were more attractive, but they certainly answer a need. They allow someone who really can't get down completely into a tub to sit comfortably. There are air jet options. And really a way for someone to not have to give up tub bathing and still be safe.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. Before we end today, Doug, did you have any final thoughts or comments on today's presentation that you wanted to provide our audience?
I would just encourage them, please email me. My email's there, dougwalterarchitects@gmail.com. Any other questions that you have, and I'll make sure they get in front of the right people, and we will respond to all these. I would like to get a FAQ up on the website for people who are confused about the guidelines. I saw that Sarah, who teaches students, had a ton of questions. I'm looking forward to diving into and answering, because it shouldn't be a mystery. I mean, this is the guidelines are intended to help you. It's kind of a Cliff's Notes of all these various documents that we refer to in one place that you can go to, or your junior designers can go to and try to do the right thing. So I just thank everybody for taking the time to spend today and learning more about the guidelines, and please make them your friend.
Amazing. Thank you again, Doug, for sharing these guidelines with us. And thank you again to Hardware Resources for generously sponsoring this month's Design and Business webinar series. Until next time, I hope everyone has a wonderful day.